Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk a little bit about this film that I watched a couple of days ago, 2023 film that came out back in January called 1001. It stars Tiana Taylor and William Catlett as parents trying to raise a family amid the changing chaos and the changing uh, social dynamics of New York City. As the title says, it's basically a journey through time um, of New York City. The film begins in 1994 with Inez de la Paz, a hairdresser and convicted thief who is released from Rikers Island prison. The film starts out with her doing another inmate's makeup, and then she's released. And as she's released, you can see around you the surroundings of New York City. I think the story starts off in Brooklyn, um, amid the decay. As we know, the crack epidemic hit in the 1980s. We talked about it before in many other videos. The Dinkins era, the Ed Koch era. New York City was probably one of the worst crime-ridden cities in America. The crack epidemic hit all parts of urban America, but hit New York City particularly bad because even before the crack epidemic, uh, New York was um, was not great. So the times that she's dumped into is about the time that the change is going to occur. So she's going around, she's putting out flyers for to do hair. People are happy to see her back because she was one of the best hairdressers in her neighborhood, and she starts calling over this boy, Terry, who is played by, let me get the exact names of the actors here. He is played by Aaron Kingsley Adoletta, the young boy, and she's calling him over and she's speaking to him, you know, as if that's her son. I mean, he's in foster care, so she basically observes him on the playground, sees that the foster care mother has neglected him. He's actually fallen out of a couple of story window and he ends up in the hospital. So when she doesn't see him around in the street anymore, she asks her friend, his friend, where is he? Where did he go? She finds out that he'd gone into the hospital. So it's it's taken for granted in the conversation that she knows who Terry is. You know what I mean? They've talked before. Terry in fact says, "Why do you keep leaving me?" and alludes to the fact that he was left on the corner when he was 2 years old. Inez, in fact, herself was left on the corner when she was 2 years old. But when he says this, she becomes immediately defensive. So, right off the bat, we are presented with a situation of a single mother trying to um, basically rescue her child from the foster care system. So she says, "Do you want to come live with me?" And he says, "Yeah." But the problem is, she doesn't have legal rights to him. She doesn't have uh, any legal documents to his custody. She's not fighting from in custody court or family court or anything. She just takes him from the hospital and she says, "Yeah, but we're going back to where I come from, and that's Harlem." So we're introduced to Harlem now as a character in the movie because as bad as other parts of New York were, I would venture to say that Harlem probably was the worst. And this is very sad considering the fact that Harlem plays such an important role in the culture of New York City, and particularly in communities of color. You know, uh, Spanish Harlem for Spanish people, and of course, this is the African American section of Harlem. Harlem is a historic part of New York City, and at this time, it was being completely neglected, completely abandoned. You see abandoned buildings, buildings boarded up. It looked like basically it looked like a third world country. So it was a glimpse into what it was like, and her she has to survive with him. You know, she goes to a friend's house. She tries to call up as many people as she can. And during the time when they're eating pizza, she has the paper because she wants to make sure that no one is out there looking for him. You know, that his image is not in the paper. Uh, you know, and they're not out there, you know, basically putting a manhunt for him because he's been illegally abducted. So she gets the paper and she makes a comment to him about Rudy Giuliani's head. She says, "In this guy's head, huge." So this is again, this is a glimpse into the time frame that we're dealing with. We're dealing with late 1993, early 1994, when Giuliani is coming in, and as we know from from those of us that know the history of New York, major changes are about to happen. Major changes are about to happen in the life of Inez and Terry as well, because they go to stay with a friend of hers. And immediately when they go to stay with this friend, it's a friend from the group home. Inez tells the friend the secret that is that Terry is in the system. She doesn't have custody of him. That he and her are basically on the run. So, but the friend's mother is wondering why Terry is so quiet, why he doesn't say anything, why he never talks. You know, he just basically plays with his toys, and that's about it. He's very to himself, and she's also getting on Inez about getting a job. Yes, Inez does hair, but she needs something more. You know what I mean? And she goes out all hours of the night trying to get work, trying to make money. And the mother basically accuses her of being a prostitute, being a hooker, saying that, quote unquote, that she is bringing 125th Street to her apartment. And Inez snaps and she pushes the girl's mother. And this is the last straw. And the girl and her go out and she says, "When are you gonna learn that you're enough? When are you gonna learn that you don't have to fly off the handle at every single insult that comes your way? That you can let things slide. You can't have such a temper." But now Inez and Terry are faced with a worse dilemma because they have nowhere to stay. They've burned every single bridge, and for a couple of days they actually stay in the lobby of this apartment until Inez is able to um, stay with another person. She sees this ad on the street, apartments for rent, and she applies there. And she lives with this older lady who gets her a job in Queens. Initially, she's hesitant to get this job in Queens because it's so far away. It's in another borough. She has to take several trains, and it's for being a nurse's aide, something that she's not particularly good at. You know what I mean? She doesn't really have the skills necessary to do that kind of work, but she does it anyway. And it allows her, first of all, Terry and this other kid, P, the lady's grandson, they form an immediate friendship that becomes a lifelong friendship, as we'll see later on. And uh, that allows Inez enough money to save up to get her own place by herself. Just her and Terry, and later Lucky, played by William Catlett, her boyfriend. She mentions Lucky in the beginning, and the audience is kind of led on a guessing game, a guessing game of sorts, to wonder if Lucky is uh, the father to uh, Terry. Because when Terry in an earlier scene asks, "Well, where's my father?" she says, "He's gone, but I have someone else in mind for you." So basically, that's an indication to the audience that Lucky isn't the father. But then Lucky and Inez talk in side comments about, you know, telling the boy later on what's the secret to him, or what are the secret to his origins. So the audience is left guessing. Well, maybe Lucky is the father, but he skipped out. And the thing about Lucky is that he looks much older than he actually is. So it's like it's given the indication that Inez was kind of impressionable, that she was kind of easily manipulated of sorts when she was younger. And she does say that, she's been in a lot of relationships when she was younger. You know what I mean? So she probably never had a father herself. She was out there looking for a father figure, and she found it in somebody like Lucky. And of course, this is a nostalgia show. This is a look back show. Like I said, a journey through the history of New York fashion. So each and every time you'll see like little Easter eggs and little nuggets of things that were, cultural attaches, cultural artifacts of the 90s. Like, for example, in in the 2000s, when they go to the 2000s, like she's wearing Tommy Hilfiger clothes, Tommy Hilfiger baggy clothes. So she basically looking like the mid 1990s version of Aaliyah or TLC, like when they wore the 90s Tommy Hilfiger clothes. That was huge back then, even for girls in the 90s. That was the sexy look back then, right? And you'll hear some of the music in the background. Puff Daddy, for example, when Lucky and her get married, you hear a radio broadcast of a Diddy interview from 1994. Later on, you hear them talking about Quincy Jones when Inez goes to work and she leaves Terry in the apartment, by himself. He's watching TV, and on TV they're they're doing a documentary about Quincy Jones and how Quincy Jones was one of the first black composers, and how he worked on the Wiz, and how he broke down racial barriers um, in the music business. And this really inspires Terry, because Terry, despite being kept out of school for basically a year and a half after when he and his mother wanted to run, he is a gifted child. And later when well later, after Lucky and his mother get married, and Lucky basically promises that he will never leave the mother, and he will always stick by uh, Inez and Terry's side. He We moved to 2001, where Terry is now 13 years old, and he is played by uh, Avon Courtney. And now he's an older kid. He's not really up on the latest slang. Um he's not hip, he's not cool, he's not outspoken. He's a very shy kid. He's still kind of to himself, kind of, but he is a little bit more mature, trying to fit in, still friends with P. And P and him go to this restaurant where P basically teases this girl that he was trying to get with, named Simone. And he calls her, at first he's trying to get with her, but then he calls her Midnight. So it's a lot of colorism in this too. There's a lot of talks about colorism in several scenes, and particularly with the girl, that's one of the biggest. instances of colorism where we see like a girl who's darker complexion trying to be basically discriminated against just because uh, she wouldn't get with these dudes. And his friends, Terry's friends, teenage friends, including Pete, they're uh, they're very belligerent, they're very rude, you know, all that. And he's not like that. I mean, he's a shy kid. He's smart. They're gonna get him to the STEM program in the special school. But the problem is getting into the special school. He's a little apprehensive because he's not a kid that wants to be told what to do, and that's one of the contentions that his parents have. Um, yeah, Inez wants to get him into the school, but the father, Lucky, he's like, nah, he doesn't want to be told what to do. He doesn't want to be held down. But she wants him to have a better life. She wants him to achieve stuff. And as this is happening, New York is you can see New York undergoing the change. You can see Giuliani instituting the decency laws that he instituted against things like jaywalking, things like loitering, things like graffiti. Measures that Giuliani basically took to overhaul the city and quote unquote make it better. But as he's making it better, of course, it's pushing out a lot of the poor people, a lot of the poor families, like Inez, Lucky, and Terry. But and also you can see, like I said, a lot of the cultural things that are taking place within the world. We see it through his eyes. For example, like going back to when he's a kid in the '90s, when Lucky puts on a CD through a CD case, which is basically the only piece of inheritance that Lucky is able to give Terry, is his CD case. He puts on Mobb Deep, Infamous. So this is around 94, 95. So it takes us to a time and a place in the city and in the world. So Terry at this time is very confused. He's kind of angry. He doesn't know, you know, where his life's headed. Basically, they want him to go into this school, but he doesn't want to necessarily go into this school because he doesn't want to leave his friends. He's tired of being abandoned. He has tremendous abandonment issues from being, going here and going there early on. So there's this one scene when Lucky has this dope ass Averex jacket. I gotta say, one of the dopest jackets that I ever seen. And I remember them Averex jackets. Like I said, the fashion, when it gets to the fashion and the trends of the '90s, it hits it right on the nail. The Averex jacket is dope. But anyway, he leaves the apartment and Terry gets upset and he tracks him down to the basketball court, and that's when Lucky tells him, you know, what it was like when he first met his mom. That he went up to her and he told her that she was the most beautiful woman in the whole world, and that gives Terry the idea to one day say that to Simone. But Terry and Inez and Lucky continue to have problems, especially Inez and Lucky, because Lucky has a wandering eye. You know what I mean? There's this girl across the street that he's interested in. That she's lighter skinned. She has quote unquote better hair. So again, that allusion to colorism, that struggle with colorism, that um, is dealt with in the black experience in many movies, but is dealt particularly in this one. So basically, Inez has a jealous streak about her, because she thinks, oh, Lucky likes this girl because she's lighter skinned and has better hair. So Lucky leaves the house and he goes to spend time with this girl. Later, we find out that Lucky actually um, impregnated the girl and has a kid with her. So flash forward past 2001. That's 2001. We flash forward to 2005. Lucky is now in the hospital. He's suffering with cancer, and Josiah Cross plays the part of 17-year-old Terry, and he's still a good student. He's about to graduate. He's heavily into music. They want him to get into engineering, but he is heavily into music. That's his dream, and he hopes to go into college. But now the neighborhood has completely changed. We're in the Bloomberg years. We're past 9/11. Gentrification is in full gear to the point where Inez and Terry's apartment is purchased by this white man as a landlord, and the white man basically refuses to do any adequate repairs. And the super, they do the repairs, and the leak busts anyway. And they tell him, you got to move out of the apartment or go stay with a family member. They don't have any family members. Keep in mind, they're completely the three of them on their own, and no support system because Lucky is stuck in the hospital with the cancer. So there's pretty cool moments between uh, Lucky and Terry where he talks about how, oh, he's a true old head. He's making fun of the music, and he says, look, you like this kind of music, and you don't even know the origins of the music. You know where the music came from, where the samples came from. Uh, you know, really hitting it on the head that he'll understand when he gets older. And he says he wants him to keep that CD collection. And eventually, when Lucky does pass away from cancer, he listens to the sample of "We Gonna Make It," the Jada Kiss and Styles P song, and he understands. Just like we all understood when we were into hip hop, that the music of hip hop actually had an older origin. And Bloomberg is heard in the radio in the background talking about how we're fixing up the city, and they show like 125th Street building an Old Navy, building a T-Mobile building, all this kind of stuff, and the changes that New York has completely gone through. And as Inez searches to look for the super because of the leak and because of the tiles falling apart, she sees that is a symbol to the audience. Hey, um, the neighborhood has changed. Just shows like In the Heights, deal with gentrification, how the residents of In the Heights are completely of Washington Heights, that area of Washington Heights are completely pushed out for uh, whiter residents with more money, and that's basically what's happening to them. And at the same time, Terry is applying to these colleges. So the teacher says to Terry, "Well, why don't you come in for this internship? To work." He says, "But I'm going to need your social security number and I'm going to need your birth certificate." Now he already, I guess, he's aware that he has a fake birth certificate and a fake social security number because when he was a kid, that's how the mother got him registered in all of these places. You know what I mean? Because he didn't have a real identity. She had his name changed, but he goes for it anyway. He looks through her stuff and he gives it to the worker. Now I was a little confused why he would give it to the worker because he knows that this is the fake one and they're going to run it through the computers and they're going to find out that it's fake. But he gives it to the worker anyway, and of course, the worker finds out that it's fake, and he has to basically confront his mom about it. He confronts her. She says, "Of course it's fake." He said, "What do you mean the real one? What do you mean the real one?" He's baffled as to why she doesn't have his actual real documents. All this at the same. She says, "In the morning, I'll go to the school and I'll talk to the teacher about your situation. I'll discuss the situation." In the morning, he can't find her. The teacher comes in, uh, you know, knocks on his door, and she has cops with her. And the cops basically coming in to take him away because he's 17, he's about to be 18, but he still hasn't aged out of the system yet. And at the same time, he finally musters up the courage to talk to this girl, Simone. He tells her over the phone the same thing that his father Lucky once told um, his mom that she's the most beautiful girl in the world. They have dinner together. She confesses, why she didn't like his friend, his friends, and she tells him, "Listen, I would love to be with you, but I'm about to move to Florida because the rents are getting too expensive in New York, and gentrification, the white people moving in is basically driving us out of the neighborhood." So once again, in Terry's life, somebody has left him. Uh, Somebody has abandoned him. So now, when his mother asks who the girl is, he says, "Oh, it ain't." He's playing this video game. He says, "Oh, it ain't nobody. I like Spanish girls." And she gets real mad because she's like, "What, a girl that looks like you ain't good enough for you?" So again, the conversation about colorism and anti-blackness within uh, the black community. But going back to the social worker, when the social worker comes in, she basically tells him that she has to take him to foster care because he was kidnapped out of the foster care system. But she drops a bomb on him about basically that Inez was never his mother to begin with. So the whole time, the audience is led to believe that she's the mom, but she's actually not his real mother, not his biological mother. She was someone who saw him abandoned as a kid, and she wanted to help him because she herself had gone through that. And he and the audience both are completely in shock. We don't know what to make of it. And there are allusions to it because each time, like I said, uh, the mother and he have, Lucky and the mother have conversations. There's allusions to a big secret, and we're led to assume that the secret is that Lucky isn't his father, or that he was kidnapped out of the foster home, or something like that. But the actual secret is that Inez was never his biological mother; that she was just somebody who found him, in the street and wanted to help him, and she did. So then he comes back to the apartment to get some of his things. He confronts her as she's cleaning out the CD case, and she tells him, the story. And one of the most poignant lines is, "A black woman don't get love by nobody, only other black women, and even that's messy." So basically, she did it for not only him, but she did it for herself too. That she wanted somebody to love, somebody to care about, and she found it in this boy. But it's a heartbreaking scene because he's like, "Okay, now we go away," and it was like we was never here. It was like, we never existed, and that calls us back to a scene. First got the apartment and they're painting it, and he says, "Well, who lived here before us?" And she says, "I don't know, some immigrants." "And who lived here before that?" She says, "The baby, I don't know. Go to the library and find out." Basically, look up the history of it. So, history and cultural changes and racism and discrimination and gentrification play a huge role in this movie, as well as sexism and colorism. Uh, um, like I said, when it's set in the '90s, you can see it set in the '90s. His favorite toy, when he goes to the hospital, she gives him a bear, a teddy bear at first, and he says, "I don't want that. That's corny." He likes Power Rangers, so she brings him Power Rangers toys the next day. The clothing they wear, big baggy jeans with side pockets. Uh, you know, Basically what I wore in the '90s when I was a teenager in the late teens. Just the fashion, the music, the swag of it is completely New York in the late '90s and early 2000s, and that's what I like about it. It's like the city is basically a character in the movie, And Tiana Taylor, she knocks it out the park with this performance. This was really her first acting performance. We know her more from music. I mean, she was in the Medea movie. She was in um, one Tyler Perry movie, Medea's. Was it Medea? Medea's Big Family. Medea's Medea's Big Happy Family. She was in that, and other than that, she's just been in music videos. She's a Harlem native, so it was close to her roots. It was deep to her. It was like it's almost like she was kind of playing her real self because it was such an emotional roller coaster. One of the things it reminded me of was Mickey Rourke's performance in The Wrestler, or Brendan Fraser's performance in The Whale. You know what I mean? Something that is so deep and so emotional to a person. You know, because it's so real. You know, it's so pointed. It actually, could actually be their real life. It was shot in that kind of Darren Aronofsky documentary style, and the city, like I said, is an important character in the movie. The only downfall I give it is the fact that the twist, making him not her real son. You know, you know what I mean. That on the part of A.V. Rockwell, who wrote the movie, and Moonlight also is another movie that this was kind of reminiscent of. How it takes us through three different time periods of one child's life, and how the child was very quiet, and he basically thrust it into the world that he's living in, and the things that are happening to him around him, and he's part of it. So it's like Forrest Gump too, in a way, where you get to experience in Forrest Gump, you get to experience the history of the late '60s in the United States. Not the late '60s, the late 20th century in the United States, starting with the '60s, through the eyes of this man who was raised by a single mother, and the it's a period piece, but a period piece through the eyes of an individual, and particularly a kid who is full of youth and naivete. So, but the downside to it is making him not her real son, because then the sacrifices that she made as a single mother, they make less sense. I mean, they make sense that she was, that she was benevolent, that she didn't want to see kids end up in the system. But if she'd have been his real mother, I feel like the stakes, of course, they have to follow the, the actual story, of it. But I'm saying, like, if she'd have been his real mother, the actual stakes would have been higher. I say, she would have been willing to put her put her um, put her neck out on the line, risk her freedom once again, risk it all to save her child. That makes sense to most people's minds. But the fact that she wasn't was never his mother, just like the movie Tulsa, or just like Curly Sue, which was another film like that, made it kind of weird. Like, I feel like the twist ending was not necessary. They wanted to tell this story of single motherhood and what single mothers go through at a particular time and place, the struggles that they have. That could have made sense, or the struggles to build a family, to build and maintain a family on the lower socioeconomic ebb in the late '90s and early 2000s in New York City. That would have made sense. But the twist of her not being the mother, it completely makes her struggles, somewhat void, in my opinion. But anyway, guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Other than that, that's the only takeaway that I give this film. Like I say, I take points away necessarily from this. Other than that, this was a spectacular film. If you want to capture the true essence, the true ambiance, if you will, of mid to late '90s, early 2000s New York. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, my era of New York. Watch this film. Tiana Taylor, not only does she look good, I mean, she is fine as hell in this movie, especially in the beginning. You know what I mean? It reminds me of a lot of girls that I had crushes on, back in the '90s. When I was coming of age, she's bad in this movie. She's real good looking, really in shape, real sexy. Uh, Josiah Cross is a really good actor. William Catlett, you get the sense that he is facing what he's facing as a man trying to provide for his family but really can't. As a black man trying to keep his head above water. Peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Love you guys.